Alright guys, welcome back to Wild Outdoor Living. So today we're going to be talking about this bad boy behind me. This is the Trek Checkpoint ALR 4. I got it last year during the summer and put 1,000 miles on it rather rapidly. So the Trek Checkpoint ALR 4 is an aluminum gravel bike. It has a tire width rating of up to 700 by 45. It's not specifically rated for 650B, but a lot of people have converted it to that. It's got plenty of room, let me tell you, both front and back. It has what they call the stranglehold dropout on the rear, so you can slam that rear wheel forward for nice snappy road bike like handling, or you can pull it back and have a little bit more tire clearance as well as a more stable ride. One thing to really pay attention to is this aluminum model. So I could ride a 58 in the aluminum model, and I actually have. One of my friends has a 58 and I tried it and felt okay. But in the carbon model, what I determined is my legs are maybe a little bit shorter than most, my height. And so if I was to go with a 58, I would have to run the shorter seat mast cap, which doesn't come with the bike. So I would have to immediately trade seat mast caps from the beginning. And if I did that, there's a small chance that it still wouldn't fit. So if you're looking at the carbon model, you need to be really careful about that saddle to rail height measurement. Really important you get a size that is going to fit you so you can actually lower the seat enough. On the 56, I would be just fine, but on a 58 carbon, I definitely wouldn't, and that's part of what tipped me off to the fact that I probably wanted to go with the 56, even in the aluminum model. So I went with the 56, and it's treated me really well. But if you're going to order one of these bikes and you can't try it out, you know, definitely pore over that geometry chart really closely. So the bike out of the box is a Tiagra setup. Now you can also get the ALR 5, which is a 105 setup. That one is going to be 2x11. This bike is a 2x10. All of the Checkpoint models this year anyways are going the 2x route. And I think that's a great thing. The 1x is cool, it's trendy, and I love 1xs on mountain bikes. But this bike actually works incredibly well as a road bike, and that normal compact gearing is just really versatile. So for some, you're going to have to get a smaller double crankset in the front, or you might have to change the cassette in the back. But in general, the bike comes pretty well spec'd. It's got an 11 to 34 10-speed cassette in the rear, and on the 11-speed models, same thing. 11 to 34, you're just getting smaller jumps in between. On mine, I've got an 11 to 36. I changed that out, used a Wolf Tooth Road Link. On the front, I haven't changed anything. Still a 50-34 crankset. And it's worked really well. For the road rides, it gives me tons of high end. If you only ride gravel and you know you're going to need lower, or you would like lower, there's definitely lower options out there. Absolute Black has some chain rings that will fit and look absolutely awesome. And there's some other options as well. So many of you may want to shrink the size of that big chain ring especially. That's maybe one downside. On a lot of rides, I don't mind the 50 tooth, but on some, I do notice that, you know, the 50 tooth is just a little bit too big for the speeds I want to go, but then the 34 is maybe a little bit too small. So you've got to weigh that. But for most people, for the large average population that is going to use this as a really versatile road bike / gravel bike, they're speccing it really well. It's got a 1-to-1 ratio out of the box. We're getting hydraulic brakes from Shimano. Now, downside here, these are the ugliest hoods ever made. Upside, they're pretty comfortable and you don't notice them. So I've gotten used to them. But when these first came out on other bikes, I was just appalled that Shimano would make a lever this ugly. But it grows on you and you get used to it. 105 and Ultegra is awesome. It definitely looks better. And the ergonomics feel a little bit nicer components, but this thing is going to get beat up. It goes to some nasty places, and most likely I'm going to break something on it eventually. And so these Tiagra components are going to be cheaper for me to replace. Couple of huge changes out of the box. First of all, I'm running 43mm Gravel King tires from Panaracer, and I've only ever ridden those tires on this bike. They measure almost to 45mm wide. Yours, if you buy this bike, are going to come with 35s. They're either going to come with Schwalbe's, or they're going to come with Kenda Flintridge Pros, depending on what's available at the time. So keep that in mind. The 35s are great if you're going to use this primarily as a road bike with a little bit of gravel on the side. Totally fine. If you're going to use this as a dedicated gravel bike with some road on the side, I would recommend swapping out those tires. The other thing is the tires that are going to come with the ALR version versus like the SL version checkpoints is they're not going to be tubeless ready. So even though the wheels are tubeless ready, you're going to have to get different tires. So I have always ridden this bike with the Gravel Kings on. I have never ridden the Flint Ridge Pros. Now they look like a fine tire. They are quite thick. They're like a 30 TPI. Like, these tires are cheap. But if you're just going to use it on the road with some occasional gravel, these tires are going to roll really fast. They should last a decently long time, and they're cheap. You can't sell them for hardly anything, so you might as well run them. The Schwalbe G1s that come on a lot of the checkpoints as well and are advertised on the checkpoint, maybe a faster tire, maybe, but not a great tire either. Also a cheap version of the G1, and a tire that tends to get torn quite often, so not a real reliable piece there. Other things I changed right out of the box. So I immediately double wrapped these bars, and they came out super fat. Like, they are so fat. They're way fatter than what is on the 920. Same tape on the outside, same tape on the inside. The reason they're so much bigger is because there's a gel insert under that cork tape from the factory. So if you don't have the money to double wrap, but you're thinking you might want a little bit more padding than maybe your other road bike has, this is already going to come with it. So you don't have to double wrap, but if you do, oh my goodness, this is so plush. I really like it. This bike comes in this black with the chrome as well as a bright orange. Now the bright orange looks awesome. It's got some green Trek lettering on it, and it's just generally a hot color. Personally, I knew I was probably going to keep this bike for a long time. Some bikes I buy and sell, some bikes I don't, and I really wanted to not get tired of the orange. I did the Gravel Pursuit 120 up in Island Park burly race, like burly race. I was really impressed. I've done the Crusher, you know, I've done some other races, I've done mountain bike races. The Gravel Pursuit should really be called the Adventure Pursuit, and this bike did awesome. I will say though that I will probably take a mountain bike on the next time just to see which is faster, and also because I think it'll definitely be more comfortable. But this bike did really well. I know a lot of people crashed on that route. There's just a huge section where it just becomes a mountain bike race. It's two track, it's really rough two track, then there's single track, and then there's no track at all whatsoever. For a certain short portion, you're just following flags through a field. It's pretty awesome, actually. I will say that, like, part of the race goes through where we did the Yellowstone branch line trail. You guys can see that video on my channel. We did that on the 920s. We later did it on the Stash. The Stash was way faster, like twice as fast on that route. And then part of that Gravel Pursuit is on similar terrain in the same area. So you really might want to take a mountain bike. But if you take a gravel bike, this is a really good one to take. And it actually, with the same size tires, is better off-road than the 920, which I found really surprising. I was all set to take the 920 on the Gravel Pursuit. I was just like, hey, it's more of a mountain bike. I know this route is kind of rough. Didn't realize how rough, but knew it was kind of rough. Thought I'll take the 920. I swapped back and forth on these bikes, tested them back to back. Really wanted to take the 920. Couldn't do it. I redid all the cabling. I got it ready to go, and started doing back-to-back testing, and ultimately just said, hey, I have to take this bike. It's that much better off-road. It's just tied a lot better together. The front end feels tighter. It's a little bit more accurate in the steering. So with the same size tires, I feel more confident on this bike, and that's saying a lot. The 920 is great off-road. This bike is a beast. And really, I rode through some nasty obstacles. Lots of rocks, lots of really steep two-track and stuff like that. And I was really comfortable on it in terms of handling. The bike is pretty compliant, and it's really smooth as far as it can be, but it's still a rigid gravel bike. And so that race definitely beat me up, but I had a really fun time. I never doubted the abilities of the bike. I never felt like scared like I sometimes do when I'm on a road bike and I try to go too far and maybe you get a little out of your comfort zone. Definitely didn't have that on this bike. I knew it was going to take me home. I knew I was going to be safe, and I knew I could just keep going. And that was really reassuring. But there was a lot of people that passed me on 29er hardtails and other bikes like that on some of the downhills towards the end of the race that were just really rocky and just shook me to death. It was rough, but for a gravel bike that can be, you know, do 40 miles an hour in a group sprint and just be all around fun all the time, really, really impressed. In terms of things it might not be as good at, you know, the 920 is great for pulling trailers. I don't know if this is as stable. It's also a little bit of a more aggressive position than some other bikes, and so it might not be the best for pulling your kids around, but I think it'll probably still be pretty good. It is not as light as an Amanda. It's not as comfortable as a mountain bike, but for what it is and what it does, really impressive. And although I love this bike and I'm kind of enamored with it, to be honest, you know, the cable routing doesn't make any sense to me. So they've routed it down here into the down tube and kept it all kind of nice and close, which is cool. And it makes for your handlebar bags to be really tucked away. Like, there's nothing to get in the way. When you put maybe a number plate on there, it's not going to get tangled up in a bunch of hoses and cables because everything comes back. The problem is it comes back to where your knees are. So if you're out of the saddle and you're riding kind of spiritedly, I would always brush my knees on it, and steering felt kind of funny. So I've actually used a strap to kind of hold it together and get it out of my way. Whenever I recable the bike, I'm definitely going to shorten a lot of those because they don't need to be as long, but I'm not sure I like the way they did that. But overall, it's a small gripe. Other possible downsides, so as good as this thing is off-road and as well as it handles, part of the reason it handles and turns so fluidly and so nicely is partly because the geometry is set up in a way that you do end up with some toe overhang. So not everybody knows about this, not everybody experiences this. You're not going to experience this on a gravel race unless it's gravel pursuit, and you're not going to experience this on a road ride. I definitely experienced this on gravel pursuit because there's a lot of switchbacks going up to two-top, and on other pieces of single track I experienced it a little as well, but lots of switchbacks, lots of manualing up and over roots, stuff like that. It gets a little bit of toe overhang. It's almost hard to call it toe overhang. On my size, you know, I slam my cleats all the way back, so that means my feet are all the way forward. So I'm in kind of an ideal position to get toe overhang in the first place. So not everyone's going to experience this, but for me it's less toe overhang and more toe drag. So if I'm turning really sharp, the tire doesn't hit the side of my toe, it hits the end. So you get a buzz. It's not enough to make you fall off. It's not enough to really cause a problem, but you know, when you're riding the bike in the most technical situations, you may run into that issue. So it's something to think about. If you're riding a lot of really, really technical situations, you don't want toe overhang, maybe you need to run even bigger tires than this. You know, this is an awesome bike, but maybe you're looking more towards a monster cross bike, maybe a Salsa Cutthroat, maybe a 920 but with bigger tires. You know, there's a few other options out there for you. So, you know, overall there's some pros and cons to the Checkpoint. There's a bunch of different models that you can choose from. But as a platform, I think it's a great choice to go to. I definitely think going to the ALR is worth the jump up from the AL. And if you've got the money to go for the carbon version, it's got some more comfort features on it, the ISO-speed decouplers. But for me, for my budget, for being able to spend money on going to races rather than just on carbon, I definitely prefer the aluminum model. The ride is nice and smooth, the handling is nice and consistent, and overall that was kind of the best choice for me. So this is a long video, but it's definitely a full review. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments below, and we'll catch you later.